The National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. is one of the most visited in the world, yet this incredible exhibition is only one of 19 museums, 9 research centres and a national zoo that form the Smithsonian Institution. Many of these free-to-visit sites flank the National Mall between the US Capitol and the Washington Monument. In this film, we'll take a brief look at some of these remarkable treasures and hear the amazing story of how this institution came into being. Born in 1765, James Smithson, an English scientist, was the illegitimate son of Hugh Smithson, who later became the first Duke of Northumberland. Described as the best chemist and mineralogist of his year, Smithson received a Master of Arts degree from Pembroke College, Oxford. He was nominated to the Royal Society of London and made a Fellow in 1787. One of his study subjects was the use of calamine in making brass, which would eventually be called Smithsonite. Smithson died in Genoa, Italy in 1829 and was buried in the Protestant cemetery. Despite never having visited America, Smithson left his considerable fortune to the United States to found an establishment for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. It wasn't until 1904, 75 years after his death, that Smithson's body was brought from Italy to Washington. Known as the Castle, the first Smithsonian building houses an information centre as well as the institution's administrative headquarters. The final resting place of James Smithson can also be found in a small chapel-like room at the north entrance to the castle. Founded in 1889, the Smithsonian's National Zoo celebrated its 125th anniversary in 2014. The next museum to open, in 1910, was the National Museum of Natural History. The museum's 8-ton, 14-foot-tall African elephant is shown in a setting that recreates the Angolan bush. With free admission and open 364 days a year, this is the second most visited museum in the world. Visitors to the Ocean Hall see a precise replica of a North Atlantic right whale named Phoenix, which has been tracked by scientists since 1987. Also on display in this section is an aquarium featuring a live coral reef. A must-see at the museum is the Harry Winston Gallery, containing the Cullinan blue diamond necklace and the very rare and beautiful Hope diamond. In May 2014, the bones of a T-Rex, having just arrived from Montana, were starting to be examined and studied for future exhibition. Before leaving the museum, it's worth taking a stroll amongst the live butterflies in the Butterfly Pavilion. Next door to the Natural History Museum is the American History Museum, opened in 1964. On entering the museum, the visitor encounters the Star-Spangled Banner. This historical flag was the inspiration for the poem that became a national anthem. The Price of Freedom exhibition concentrates on the history of the American military. George Washington's sword and scabbard are featured in the section devoted to the War of Independence. There are also sections illustrating America's role in the First World War and later in World War II. Following the Second World War, the Cold War threat and the Vietnam War are represented. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the tragedy of 9/11 are poignantly displayed in this wonderful museum. For many visitors to Washington, the most exciting exhibition is that of the National Air and Space Museum, which opened in 1976. The Apollo 11 command module from the first manned lunar landing mission is a crowd-drawing centerpiece.
Has anybody ever flown a kite or seen kites flying? Well, you see a kite up in the air, and what happens? The wind shifts and it wobbles, right? And so you kind of move it around to catch the air. Well, that's what the wing working does. When the wind might pick up one wing, they curve the wing and then settles out to be flat again.
From the Wright brothers' first flight to the tiny plane that winged Charles Lindbergh across the Atlantic, many aviation records were set by Amelia Earhart, some of them in this Lockheed 5B Vega. The World War I and World War II exhibitions contain many iconic aircraft, but it is perhaps the space race and moon exploration exhibits that attract and excite the most. Housed in a beautiful limestone building, designed to evoke natural rock formations, one of the newest museums is that of the Native American Indian. Construction was underway in 2014 for the National Museum of African American History. In January 2015, it was announced that the Smithsonian was planning its first permanent exhibition outside the United States in London. It seems somehow fitting that the Smithsonian legacy, together with its seriously amazing trademark, might come full circle to honour James Smithson, the Englishman whose bequest made it all possible.